Today, we're going to be going over the 5 tips and tricks to make some of your Rover accounting processes easier and more efficient. The first tip is going to be using this favorites menu. I think that this is really helpful when you're first starting out and learning how to use Rover, just because it kind of helps to familiarize yourself with some of the tasks that you're going to be using in Rover. I also think it's still helpful even when you're up and running on Rover, just because you can quickly switch between a lot of your most commonly used tasks. And I also think it's very helpful when you're training a new employee. I would even recommend setting up the favorites menu for that employee with the tasks that they're going to be doing daily, just to help them get a hang of how things go in Rover. The next tip that I'm going to be showing is using Cash.E4. So this is an alternative to using Cash.E. In Cash.E, you would be applying payments to customer invoices individually. So that task should be used just for individual customer invoice payments. This screen is best to be used when you have to deposit multiple checks for different customers. So for example, when you get your mail, let's say you have 3 different checks for 3 different customers, you would use Cash.E4 instead of Cash.E. So you would use this similarly to Cash.E, using the date as my deposit ID. And then you can also see your running deposit amount here, which is really helpful. So I would enter my customer here. So all of this is filled out the same way that you would fill it out in Cash.E. But then instead of having to save this and then open a new one, you would just scroll down and enter the next customer. So this really helps to save a lot of time. I'm going to do 3 different customers. Perfect. So then I can see for all the checks I received today, the total deposit is 6680. And then I can just save that, and it will create all of the individual cash records for this batch deposit instead of having to create each of these individually in Cash.E. The next one, as you know, in Rover, you have to interface your transactions to the general ledger in order to view them in your financial statements. So this can be an automated process. I know that some of you maybe have it automated to be daily or weekly. But I recommend when you're first using Rover, I know you're all current Rover users, or maybe when you have a new employee who's using Rover, to manually interface monthly just to give yourself some more control over the transactions. Um, it just because once you post everything, you can't adjust them. So if you're training someone on using Rover and they make some sort of mistakes and this interfaces to the GL daily or weekly, you may have to post adjusting entries instead of being able to just go in and adjust the entries they created. So if you want to post manually for whatever reason, you would use glint.p1. So let's say that September is closed now. So I'm going to close September. I would want to post the date level detail. That's preference, transaction detail, and then run that process. So this is creating journal entries from the transaction registers. So turning all of your transactions, your AP, your AR, and everything um, into journal entries that will then be interfaced. So I have some transactions here that were created. And then the next part of this is posting those entries. So interfacing those to the general ledger. So again, I would post the same dates. And I can see that it's posted. So once this is done, then I can view my financial statements, for example, my balance sheet, or my P&L. So that's obviously an advantage to interfacing more regularly, because once you interface, you can review your financials. This is just a tip if you need to have more control over adjusting your entries. Next one, which is using glchart.r3. I recommend using this as part of your month-end close process. This report will catch any accounts that are missing from the reports that you create in glrpt.e. So basically your P&L, your balance sheet, any of your financial statements that you have manually created. So during the month, I mean, there are definitely some times that I've created a new P&L or balance sheet account and forgotten the next step of adding it to my balance sheet or P&L. Or maybe you have a team of people and someone has created a new account and they didn't know that they had to add it to the financial statements. So I think that this is a really, really important part of your month-end close process. All you have to do is enter the report name in here. So for example, this is my balance sheet. Enter whether you're looking for balance or income accounts, and then you run this. So this tells me that all of these balance sheet accounts are not on the balance sheet that I created. So my next step would be to go into glrpt.e, which is where I create my financials, pull up that balance sheet, and then in accounts, add the accounts that were missing from that showed up in that list over here. Next tip is creating recurring AP and AR entries. This feature is really helpful for any recurring customer invoices or outgoing bills that you're going to have on a monthly basis. So the first one that we will look at is APR.E. This is for recurring AP entries. So these would be for bills that we're going to pay to vendors. So a great example of this is rent, something like that that's not going to change on a monthly basis. So I have this one set up for our rent. I have it set up with the terms of net 30. I have it going to our building rent expense account, and I have it starting on 7/1. Frequency, this means it's going to be once a month. Day of the month, it's going to start on the first of the month. Perpetual means it's going to keep going until I close it. So let's say if this is a 12-month lease, and then we're going to need to set up a new recurring for this in a year, I would uncheck perpetual and I would put 12 here. And then you can see the history here. These are the bills that have generated from this recurring rent record. This is really, really helpful for any recurring payments. Just as a reminder, maybe something that you're not going to get a formal rent bill monthly on. So this will prevent you from missing that. So this is where you create the actual entry. And then to run the entries, so for example, I run this on the first of every month for all of our bills that happen on the first. The next portion of this is APR.P1. The P stands for the process, generating the recurring AP items. So it's it's October now. I was going to say I didn't run this one in September. So we'll run this and you'll just get to see process. So the cleaning services, all of these monthly bills, created AP item. So then you can go look at this AP item. Let's see. Let's look at let's look at this one, 2220. And there is the bill that we just created through that process. So when you do create the recurring records, you do have to run that extra process step monthly or however frequently that these bills need to be created. The next part of this is just the AR side. So it's very similar to the recurring EP that we just looked at. So as an example, we're going to look at this record. We have the customer here, the invoice amount, terms, the dates. This is set up the same way as it is set up in AP. We can view a history of the invoices here. And then in the line items tab, this is set up similarly to a regular AR.E record. And then to generate the recurring invoices, we would go here, same idea as AP recurring, run this process, and then all of the invoices, see, so we didn't run it on 9/1, so it caught the 9/1 invoices. It will catch everything through this cutoff date. And then you can view any of these invoices here. You can see that 13943. And here is the invoice from our recurring record.